Every time you get paid for the services rendered, how do you actually spend that money? You see, this problem is actually prevalent among a lot of us, and we always have the problem of how we're going to spend the money we have worked really hard to earn at the end of every month. You see, a lot of people actually find themselves in this situation, and we've discovered that at the end of the day, despite every effort put into place by a lot of us to actually stop this scenario from occurring or having a deficit financial budget at the end of every month, we find this problem still persisting and this problem still continues. So, how do you spend your money every time you actually get paid? In this video, I'll be explaining some vital things that can actually help you to spend your money, to also save your money, and also to invest your money. The economic situation right now is not smiling on everybody, and everything is very, very difficult now. Most families are finding it very difficult to survive. They are finding it very difficult to actually meet up their expenses and some other things like that. So, how do you actually spend your money? We are now in a capitalist system, and as a result of this, capitalism is actually characterized by high level of inflation, which actually the world is experiencing now. There is high level of inflation everywhere. Things are very, very expensive now. So, you see, income is not going up, and expenses are skyrocketing every day, and that's why most families cannot meet up all their demands at the same time. So, how much? The question is, how much do you actually spend on your lunch? How much do you actually spend on your overpriced transportation? How much do you spend on your clothing? And how much do you spend on your monthly subscriptions and some other things like that, your miscellaneous and other things like that? Despite the fact that a lot of people still put down budgetary plans, they are unable to meet up these budgetary plans. So, this scenario is not a good one. And if you find yourself in this situation, it is very important for you to watch this video to the very end, because I'll be explaining a lot of things that will actually help you at the end of the day. Life happens, and you don't expect life to be very rosy at every time, most especially in this high inflationary trend. Like I said earlier, a lot of things are creating holes in our pocket. We spend a lot of money on transport, most especially transportation and feeding. They are taking a lot of our money from our pocket. So, at the end of every financial year, are you able to meet up your targets? When I say targets, most especially in the area of your investment, are you able to save money that if at all anything actually happens, you can be able to survive for the next 3 to 6 months? Like a friend of mine was telling me some time ago that when he lost his job, for a period of 4 months, he did not feel that there was no job or anything that he was doing, because he was really prepared for himself. He was able to save some money, and at the end of the day, despite the fact that this situation eventually happens and he lost his job, he was able to take care of himself for 4 months, and before the end of that 4 months, he was able to get another job. That is the situation. That is how it's supposed to be. So, how prepared are you? Every financial year, are you able to meet up your targets or not? At the end of every year, you are spending millions of money. Millions of money. Have you ever sat down to actually calculate how much you are actually spending every month on transportation? How much you are actually spending on feeding? How much you are actually spending on clothing? How much you are actually spending on your house rent? How much you are actually spending on your children's school fees? How much you are actually spending on other miscellaneous that actually occurs over time? So, if you calculate all this money together, you are going to realize that you are spending millions of money every year. You see, you are spending millions of money every year without any form of investment, without any form of savings. This situation is a very, very dangerous one, because if at all anything happens, because life itself actually happens, how do you actually survive at the end of the day? And that is the mistake most people are actually making, that that when things like this actually happen, they are thrown into the street after a few days or few weeks because they are not prepared for any form of emergencies. So when emergencies happens, how do you prepare yourself? When situations happens or life happens, are you able to survive at the end of the day or not? So these are questions we need to ask ourselves, as a person, as an individual, as a person at the end of the day. So at the end of every financial month that you get paid and the rest of them, how do you actually spend the money? You see, a lot of people are saying that I cannot save, I cannot even invest because the money is not even enough for me to take care of myself. Of course, out of that nothing, you can still, put something aside to invest at the end of the day. Imagine a situation where you spend all the money you earn in a month and the money is not even enough. That's a very dangerous situation. I'll give a very wise advice. Then what do you do in this kind of situation? You need to cut down on your expenses. You need to cut down on your extravagant lifestyles. You need to cut down on those things that are actually draining money from your pockets. You see, I know of some people that every day they take 2 bottles of beer, they take 3 bottles of beer, they take 4 bottles of beer sometimes, and sometimes they go out to the club and spend a lot of money. Those things are actually creating holes in your pocket, and at the end of the day, you're unable to have something to back up yourself in case of any form of emergency. So those are the things that you need to cut off on. Things that are actually creating holes in your pocket, things that are not actually adding value to your life, things that are actually, taking away money from you and not creating other money for you at the end of the day. You go out there, you drink, you spend money on expensive restaurants, you go out there and, for example, too, you are living in a very expensive apartment, like a 3-bedroom flat where you are paying 5 million or 10 million or 12 million per year, and you're expecting that everything is going to work out fine. Of course not. Then what kind of schools do your children go? Do they go to expensive schools? And at the end of the day, these things like this actually create holes in your pockets. So these are things that you need to, look into. Do you buy expensive clothes? Do you buy expensive wristwatches? Are you using expensive cars that is very, very hard for you to actually maintain at the end of the day? Fueling the car, maintaining the car, and some other things like that. So if you round up all these things together, you are going to discover that you are spending millions of money every year to, fix up all these things which I've actually mentioned now. You are having these challenges because a lot of us do not have paycheck routine. Paycheck routine. Now, what do I mean by paycheck routine? Paycheck routine simply means having what I call a budgetary plan. Do you have a budgetary plan? Do you have plans for your money that when you collect that money at the end of the month, you break it down into those things that you actually need and those things that you actually wanted, those things that you actually need. You can do away with some of them, and even those things that you actually want, you can actually do away with some of them too, or you can actually reduce how much you're actually spending on these things. So if you have a paycheck routine, then you will have a proper financial planning where you are able to draft down what or how you are going to go about in spending your money. Don't forget, it's very important that when you earn that money in every financial month, you must divide your money into 3 parts, which I've always mentioned in most of my videos, which are spending, savings, and the investment. There's a percentage of money that will go for investment, there's a percentage of money that will go for saving, and there's a percentage of money that will go for spending. Now, the basic thing you need to know is this, that when you collect that money, the first thing that you need to do is that you need to set aside the money for investment first. The money for investment should come first. Then your other things can actually come. But the money for the investment should be set aside first. Then you can now, divide that money, the remaining one, into savings and into spendings. And don't forget, your savings too is for emergency, so that in case anything happens, you can be able to survive over a period of time and when everything will back to normal again. So this is very, very important. So you need to have a paycheck routine, and you follow it very strictly and with discipline and with determination and the resiliency, because temptations will always come. You always want to spend money, and but if you are not disciplined enough, you end up going back to square one if care is not taken. So if it is very important that if you want to break even, if you want to be successful, if you want to be rich, if you want to be wealthy, you need to follow this paycheck routine, which is spending, savings, and investment. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about some things that you could actually do to manage your money efficiently. So, because when you do this, which I'm going to talk about, you can be able to save some money, and you can also be able to build up your wealth and become wealthy at the end of the day. You need to understand that when you get paid at every financial month, you need to cut down on your standard of living. Cutting down on your standard of living. You see, a lot of us, we have a high standard of living. And when I say high standard of living, these are what I mean. You eat in expensive restaurants, you spend a lot of money on feeding alone, you buy expensive wristwatches, you buy expensive shirts, and those things are actually wearing designer clothes and the rest of them. You are buying expensive shoes, you are living an expensive life, flamboyant life. You are living, or you are actually driving what I call expensive cars. You live in expensive apartment. You can readjust yourself in this area by actually cutting down on your standard of living. In most cases, sometimes you can actually leave that area where you are spending more and go to an area where you are going to be spending less. There's no crime in doing that. Nobody's going to arrest you for that. Of course, maybe you are actually living in a 3-bedroom flat where you are paying about 5 million every year. You can go to other areas where you can pay 1.5 or 1 million every year for a 2-bedroom flat. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to live in a 3-bedroom flat, because in most cases, most of those rooms are not, people are not even living there. Most of those rooms are just even vacant. You just wanted to show off that you are wealthy, you want to impress people that you actually have money. So this, cutting down your expenses or cutting down your standard of living means that you have to cut down on your pleasures, and things that are actually creating holes in your pocket. You have to cut down on your pleasures. So pleasures, drinking, going to the nightclubs and some other things like that, you have to cut down on your pleasures. So those pleasures can actually, when you actually cut those things down, they can actually give you what we call financial freedom. So when you cut down on your standard of living, you have financial freedom. When you cut down on your recklessness or financial recklessness or extravagancy, you can have financial freedom. That is, in this situation, you are able to save some money and you are also able to invest some money at the end of the day. Those money we actually see that they are insignificant, that they are very, very small. They go a very, very long way. For example, you drink 2 bottles of beer in a day. 1 bottle of beer in Nigeria is about 1,500, and you spend 3,000 naira on a bottle of beer alone. And you ask them to give you pepper soup. At the end of the day, the pepper soup is about maybe 2,000 naira. That means you have spent 5,000 naira for that day only on pleasure. Now calculate that thing. Maybe you are going there every time in a week, maybe 2 times or 3 times in a week. That means you are spending 15,000 naira on a pleasure every week. Now calculate that 15,000 naira every week. Then that will give you an idea of how much you are actually spending on these things we are talking about. So those little nitty-gritties or those little things that you see or you think that are actually insignificant, they go a very, very long way to create what? Holes in your pocket. So you are spending a lot of money. If you actually sit down and calculate how much you are actually spending on pleasure alone, you are going to realize that you are spending a lot of money. So if you cannot reduce your bill, then you have to look for a way to actually cushion the effect of these things we're talking about. Because most people say, man, I can't cut down on my expenses, I can't cut down on what I used to enjoy myself, on my pleasure, I can't cut down. Then what do you do in that situation? It means that you have to look for other alternatives. And what are these alternatives? You have to look for passive incomes or create other avenues where you are actually making money for yourself. So instead of what? In most cases where people tell you I can't stop those things, then what do? You increase your income. You look for passive income, or you look for a way where you can actually get more money to fund your lifestyle at the end of the day. And if you want more on that video, I've done video on that, on what I can actually do to create passive income for yourself at the end of the day, creating more money for yourself, so that you can be able to save money and you can also be able to invest money. It is very important for me to state this. And what is that? You see, you need to understand that we have what we call income and we have what we call expenditure. Now, your income is actually how much you are actually earning every financial month, or when you render services to people, how much you are actually earning is your income. Then your expenses or your expenditure is how much you are actually spending at the end of the day every financial month. Now, what are we saying here? Your income should be higher than your expenses. You see now, your income should be higher than your expenses. That is, if you are actually in a situation where your expenses is higher than your income, you then discover that in most cases or situation like that, you may not be able to save any money, or you may not be able to invest any money. So your income should be higher than your expenses. And what do you do in that situation? You need to cut down on your expenses. Now, another thing which you can actually do, which can actually aid you at the end of the day, is that you have to get a savings account for emergency. You have to get a savings account for emergency. Now, what do I mean by a savings account for emergency? You see, a lot of us will fail to distinguish between a savings account and the investment. Most people will tell you that I have 5 million in my bank account, in my savings account, but that 5 million naira is just for emergency. You need to understand the difference between an emergency and the investment. So if you say you have certain amount of money in your bank account, that money is not an investment. Get it right. It's not an investment, because that money in your bank account is not yielding any profit at the end of the day, but rather it is stagnant. It's not creating any value, because at the end of the day, the banks are going to use this money and lend it to other people and borrow it to other people, and the banks are making money and you are not making any money. The banks are making interest, but you are not making any interest. So you need to get that right. So you need to get a savings account if you actually want to create wealth for yourself. Now, this savings account is for emergency. Savings accounts are for emergency, because life happens, and if anything happens, you can be able to use this money to actually survive at the end of the day. So your savings account should be able to sustain you for a particular period of time. For example, 3 to 6 months. Like I said about my friend that lost his job some time ago, and for 3 to 4 months, he was surviving without any form of problem. Because why? He was actually prepared for the future, because he was prepared for emergency. So that money you are putting in your savings account is not investment, because it's not yielding any value, it's not creating more money, or the money is not working for you. But rather, your money is creating dust in the bank, and the banks are giving this money to other people in form of what? Of loans, mortgages, and the rest of them. And the banks are making money, and you are not making money. But what they're saying here is that if you want to create wealth, you need to have a savings account, because this savings account will actually save you in a period of what? Of emergency, because life actually happens. So it entails that you have to set aside certain amount of money, like I said earlier, that you have to look into 3 scenarios: savings, investment, and what? And spending. So once you get paid at every financial month, have a budgetary plan where you set aside some amount of money for your savings. This money will be for emergency. Then your investment money is the one you will not touch, because that one is a taking of a sacrifice. Then your spending is that money that will take you through every day. The money used to buy your food, the money for feeding, and some other things, miscellaneous, that actually arises every day. That money is what we call spending. So that money is what you spend. Then the savings is for emergency. Maybe something unexpected happen, you can actually take from that money to solve that problem. So you need to have what we call the savings account. Then another thing which you need to do is to allocate some certain amount of money into investment. You see, a lot of us are not investing. A lot of us, we count so much or depend so much on our savings account that is our investment. It's not an investment, because inflation is in Nigeria now. That money you think you have in your bank account and is not yielding any profit. By the time you take some part of that money, the money is gone. That is inflation for you. But something can actually create more money for you in the period of inflation, that when you are doing your primary job, you are also earning money on the side way. And that money is what we call investment money. Because while you are working, that money is also growing every day along with you. So once you get paid at the end of the month, you set aside maybe some percentage of that money into investment, so that money is what is going to be yielding profit for you at the end of the day. And that's what most of us are actually doing. Because while we are working now, we're also earning money on the other side. Some are earning $2 a day. I know of someone that is earning about $10 in a day. $10 in a day in Nigerian situation now is about 16,500 or 16,000 naira every day. $10 in a day, that is 16,000 naira. Some are earning $2, $3, $4, $5, $6. Calculate that money in a year, then you know that you are going to become a wealthy person in the next 10 years or 15 or 20 years, depending on how far you can actually go. So you need to allocate some money for investment. And when you talk about investment, I've done this video also before where I mentioned various aspects which you can actually invest your money. You can actually invest your money into shares. Like in Nigeria now, companies are selling shares. You can invest in shares. You can invest in stocks. You can invest in crypto. You can invest in real estate. You can invest in so many things that can actually yield money for you at the end of the day. So there are various forms of investment platforms that can be yielding money for you at the end of the day, that you can actually be making money even when you're not working. And that's what we're talking about, the decade of sacrifice, where you actually build up your wealth gradually. Because most people don't understand that building wealth is actually a process. It's actually a process, a decade of sacrifice. It's actually something that you have to build over a particular period of time. At least a minimum of 10 years we do for a decade of sacrifice. So don't forget that. So allocate some money for investment. You can invest in mutual funds. You can invest in Nasdaq. You can invest in the Dow Jones. You can invest in so many companies when you are earning 10, 15 to 20% interest every year. Like I am investing to what we call money market funds, where I get paid 19.99% return on my investment for every year, and I'm making money every day. And that is how it's supposed to be. If you can actually invest your money for over a particular period of time, you can be rest assured that you can actually become wealthy in the next few years. So those things that you cannot actually afford, or you are not buying when you're actually investing, in the future, when you're not working again now, you can buy those things for yourself, because at that point in time, your money will have compounded. Then another thing which you need to do for you to actually be able to be wealthy and live a life full of financial freedom is that you need to pay up your debts. You need to pay up your debts. You see, one of the wealth killers that is actually draining a lot of money from people's pocket today is actually debt. A lot of banks will not tell you this. They want you to come there, borrow money from them, pay a huge amount of money as interest. In Nigeria now, the amount of money that's actually paid as interest is 38% now. Some banks are taking 36%, some banks are taking 35%. Imagine you take the money from a bank or mortgage financial institution and the rest of them, and you are paying 38% as interest on the money you've actually collected. That is a suicide. That is what we're experiencing in this part of our world. In developing countries, in developed society, it's about 4% or 2 point something percent. So, and that's why in most of these countries, people have access to credit cards. They can, take loan from the bank and pay back, because the amount of interest, the rate is very, very low. But in our own developing countries, the rate is always very, very high, 38%. Developed countries, 2%. In developing countries, 38%. That is suicidal. So it is not good for the economy in that situation. Now, if you find yourself in this situation where you're actually borrowing money and you find yourself in high level of debt, there are two things that you can actually do. You can do what we call the avalanche method of paying up your debt, or you can do what we call the snowball effect of paying up your debt. Now, what do I mean by avalanche method of paying up your debt? When you talk about the avalanche method of paying up your debt, if you're actually finding yourself in high level of debt, is that when you talk about the avalanche method is that you pay off those debts that are attracting higher interest. You pay off those debts that are attracting higher interest. That is what we mean by what we call avalanche method of paying debt. So those debts that are actually attracting a lot of interest at the end of the day, you pay them first. Then what we mean by the snowball method of paying debt? The snowball method of paying debt occurs when you actually pay up those debts that are actually attracting the lowest level of interest. So avalanche, you pay the one that's attracting higher interest. Snowball, you pay the ones that are actually attracting lower interest. You see, both of them have their advantages at the end of the day. When you pay avalanche, it has one advantage. When you pay the snowball, it also has its own advantage. So all you need to do is to sit down and look at it. If I use the avalanche method, how much will I be able to pay in a period or a certain period of time Then if I decide to use the snowball, how much would I be able to pay in a certain period of a time? Is the amount going to be higher or lower depending on how much you're actually earning? Now, why are we advising the avalanche or the snowball effect? The reason is that a lot of people are, they are involved in so many forms of debt. They are involved in so many forms of debt. Some are owing money, from their family members. Some are owing money in 3 or 4 different mortgage financial institutions, and these things are actually drawing them down or making it very difficult for them to earn money at the end of the day. What I'm going to talk about lastly is, utilizing the tax advantage investing accounts. You see, what most people don't understand is that if you are actually an employee, the amount of tax you actually pay varies from an individual that's actually an investor. Because when you are actually an investor, the amount of money you actually pay at tax is very, very lower compared to the amount of money you pay as an employee. So those are actually that are actually into investment have an advantage in this area. So when you get paid at the end of every financial month, you need to invest some part of the money into tax advantage investing account. So what we're saying here in a nutshell is that you need to invest your money into into investment portfolios that can actually yield money for you, and the amount of money you are actually going to pay is going to be reduced to the barest minimum as an investor. Now, for example, I have some of my friends that are actually investing, and sometimes they have emergency that they need to look into, that they have to sort out, and the rest of them. And sometimes they are actually tempted in taking some of this money. When they take this money, you discover that the amount of money that they actually pay in form of interest or in form of tax is reduced to the barest minimum. So when you actually, investing your money as an investor, the amount of money you actually pay as tax is actually reduced to the barest minimum compared to someone that's actually an employee.